So thank you, Nina, for taking the time to chat today.
Of course, it's a pleasure to be here.
I think probably the first thing we want to do is kind of define the term of deacon. I think
Yeah.
first, maybe just ask how, um, what is the role of deacon kind of historically in the kind of the wider church, but then what does it mean within the Evangelical Lutheran Church in America?
Yeah. Well, I always joke that deacons are set aside in the Bible, but pastors aren't. uh, in Acts 6, deacons are called to wait on tables for the widows who are
Hmm.
foreigners. So the call to deacon in the Lutheran Church, we talk about word and service ministry. Really is to like the outsider, those on the edge, the periphery, whatever that looks like. Um, yeah, so I mean, it goes back to biblical times, right?
Hmm.
And it has looked so many different ways. A lot, early on, there was folks set aside to kind of do that caretaking, and it has been an official office of the church, since the church existed, basically. Every iteration of the church interprets it a little differently. So it's really an interesting kind of topic. I think everyone who's connected to the church, or even in a culture that has a lot of Christianity, like has a very good sense of what a pastor is. Um, that's pretty accurate. But what a deacon is, who I mean, it it's it's the sky's the limit, kind of,
Hmm.
and so there really is there really is so many interpretations and understandings of it. The church I grew up in, we had deacons, and deacons were lay volunteers who delivered communion to the homebound,
Okay.
right? So still that same, it's that same vein, right? It is those on the periphery, those who have a special need. But it didn't require like going to seminary
Hmm.
or going through a candidacy process, through a local synod, which is, the kind of deacon that I am. So there's just such a different, there's so many different understandings of it. It's very interesting, I think. And I think what ties it all together is that service, that, really, like, a lot of times it's sort of humble service,
Hmm.
on the outskirts of things. So, yeah, I don't know if that answers all your questions. You had a compound question.
Well, the second half of that is kind of um, what is being a deacon in the Lutheran tradition been all about, and
Yeah,
how did that come about?
yeah. So, I, you know, I don't know the history super well.
Hmm.
I'm just going to say that I'm not like a history buff. But in the United States, communities of deaconesses from Germany and Norway kind of came here and transferred the work that they were doing in their, country of origin to this place.
Okay.
And at the time of that great immigration from Northern Europe, um, women couldn't be pastors. If you were Protestant and you felt a call to religious life, religious leadership, being a deaconess was what you could do as a woman.
Hmm.
Um, but it's very interesting that a lot of that work, a lot of the history of the deaconess community in the United States is hospitals, it's social service outreach, it's working with marginalized communities, people in poverty, that sort of thing. And over the years, I mean, I would say in the last 30 years, what the diaconate has looked like in the Evangelical Lutheran Church has changed like three times. So there's a constant, and I just read that there's like a task force to look at candidacy in general and
Hmm.
reevaluate what that process looks like for people. So, there's a constant reinvention and reflection on what it is and what it should look like. But, for us here in the United States, the most recent iteration is taking all of these word and service little buckets. You know, 15 years ago, we had the deaconess community, we had associates in ministry, we had diaconal ministers, all with the same call to word and service that all had to do a different checklist to get through the candidacy doors, and just unifying all of those onto one roster of the church
Hmm.
with the title of deacon, because the call is the same.
So, and with that, now knowing that kind of history within the LCA, I'm kind of curious what led you to become a deacon. Obviously, probably the answer
Yeah,
you've been asked a lot of times is why not a pastor. So I'm kind of
yeah.
just curious what made you think deacon.
Um, so when I my first my first real job was doing youth ministry. I had no training. I went to a public school, studied science, had never taken a religion or theology class at all. I didn't even ever attend a church that had a paid staff person do youth ministry. But I had that job, and I sort of thought, I really like this. I'm really good at it. I should probably learn what the heck I'm doing. And I knew at that time that um, there was like other things you could be in the church besides a pastor.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and I just thought, well, okay, I'll start the candidacy process, not really fully understanding what it was. Um, and for me, I don't know. I just, how should I say this? One of the sort of cruxes of discernment around it was that I did CPE, which I did not have to do, but I wanted to do for the learning. And I worked in a children's home with middle school kids who were doing residential behavioral treatment.
Hmm.
That was where my chaplaincy was. And it was hard. It was really hard. I mean, um, I came in one day, there'd been an exorcism before I got there. One of the
Okay.
kids had requested an exorcism from the staff chaplain. Um, I, yeah, I was trapped in a room with a kid who was spitting and throwing desks at one point. It was just a very tough emotional place. And it was so good to be there. Um, I really felt called to that edge place. It wasn't standing behind the altar
Mm-hmm.
that I felt was like the really important thing to do. The really important thing to do was to listen to these kids tell their story about just the incredible pain that they had lived through, um, and to see them and be with them as they tried to process and make sense of that. So for me, that really was a really big discerning moment of like, this is hard. This is really hard, and this is a really important place to be as a church person. Um, yeah, I always felt that being a pastor would hold me back
Hmm.
from the ministry that I am most called to do,
Mm-hmm.
because there is such a tight box around pastors. You have to lead worship, you got to
Mm-hmm.
preach, you got to lead Bible study, you got to visit the elderly, and all of those things are good. Those are all good things. But I felt for me that that would hold me back from like what God really wants me to be.
Hmm.
So,
So you
and
kind
it was hard.
yeah.
We live in a world that loves pastors.
Oh yes.
and and uh and I I love pastors are great. It's fine. But um it it was hard it was difficult to get through seminary and sort of stick to my guns because I had classmates and professors and, all kinds of people say, but you're a good preacher. Why would you be a deacon? So it's like, well, word
Word.
and service.
Say, were you not listening? The word and service.
You get the whole thing about being a pastor in the Lutheran Church, at least in our understanding, is about sacraments.
Yes,
So
it is.
preaching,
Yeah.
it doesn't, it's not a special gift of the pastor folk only. So, which I hope that pressure is changing, because for me, being able to serve as a deacon is a great joy. So,
well, that kind of leads to the question. I mean, what have been the challenges of following that path of into the diaconate? Because it's I would think that one of the things that would be thought of is that it's considered a lesser path as opposed to being a pastor and of other things, and not seeing it really as a unique and important ministry of its own.
right. Yeah, I mean, a month ago, someone asked me if I was going to go into the ministry, meaning, are you going to become a pastor? And I had to explain, I'm a deacon. And they said, well, aren't you going to go to seminary? And I said, I already went. I already went to seminary. So, you kind of, I think I'm, some people say stubborn, I say determined. I mean, I think that's a great quality to have in this field, because people often don't get it. And so to just be able to say, nope, this is me. This is what God's called me to. There is a lot of that, like, that you're not there yet. You're still trying to figure it out if you're a deacon. And it doesn't help that there are many denominations where that is actually kind of how their process works. That if you want to be ordained pastor, you have to become a deacon as like an intermediary step. Which, on one hand, scripture doesn't lay out how to have church offices and how they should relate to one another. But on the other, I feel strongly that having deacons who have been called to that work specifically is really good for the church and the world. So, yeah. And the other thing I would say, when I first, so I was, oh gosh, what, 2012, I think I was consecrated as a diaconal minister. And diaconal ministers did not have titles. So if you were a deaconess at that time, you could be referred to as sister. I could have been Sister Nina. And pastors obviously have a title, and I did not have a title. And so in some of the places that I served, a title would have been very helpful, I think. It's just a language that clicks for us. Even though when you say Sister Nina, you're probably going to picture like a Catholic woman in a habit. You at least have a picture. And if you said diaconal minister Nina, you're going to just probably furrow your brow and say, I'm not sure about that. And, I used to joke with people, like, if you don't know what a diaconal minister is, that's all right, as long as you're not Greek speaking. Because, I mean, to expect someone to know what a Greek word is, and that we don't use in our language, except for this one place, is not fair. So once the ELCA unified the rosters and had the title of deacon for everyone, that has, for me, at least in my experience, that has really changed how people understand. And even if they don't have a perfect idea of what it is, they at least know that there's a title to go with it, and they have some sense of it, even if it's not totally accurate. They have that sense of service, hopefully, from their understanding of, or seeing it in scripture. Yeah, and I mean, in my current um, congregation, when I first started, people weren't really sure. And one of the things that we were very intentional about is that my colleague, John, people call Pastor John. So I'd
Hmm.
say, well, what do you call him? Because if you call him, Johnny Boy, well, you probably don't need to be really formal with me. But if you call him Pastor John, well, then you should
It's
refer
called
to me as
Deacon
Deacon
Nina.
Nina, right? And so that has really clicked on, and people almost always call me Deacon Nina.
Mm-hmm.
Um, which I think it is really helpful. I'm not a super formal person, but it means something. It
Hmm.
does mean something. It clicks in people's minds a little bit that I have an official role
Hmm.
that I have been trained and called to do in their midst. So,
One of the and you've talked about this, and I know that I've always noticed this when it comes to deacons as opposed to ministers, is that what we would call ordination, you're calling consecration. How would you explain the difference?
yeah, and so now in the ELCA, deacons are ordained.
Okay.
Um, my bishop, when that first happened and they made the switch, she called all the deacons together and said, "You're as good as ordained. You're sort of in the system now." But when I went through the process, they had different language and different rights for each of the four sort of tracks.
Hmm.
Um, and I think that was confusing. I think that was confusing to people. And I don't know, that was set out in 1993. And I am not familiar with what the thought process or reasoning was behind that. So if I was going through seminary today, I would be ordained a
Hmm.
deacon
Okay.
rather than consecrated. But when I was, got my magic dust sprinkled over me, it was a consecration.
So, what has been your experience in churches when people kind of um, encounter you? We've kind of talked about this a little bit, but um, have they have there been a lot of cases where people just don't know what to how to deal with you?
Yeah, I mean, the most helpful thing is when people actually just talk to me or ask
Hmm.
questions about it. So, there we kind of mentioned before, like there are people who there's some confusion. I've People have thought I'm an intern before. I was like, "You're a pretty good preacher for an intern, thanks." um, or they think that I'm like on a step, and that when you think about the hierarchical thing to maybe hopefully I'll be a pastor one day, which is not what I hope. Um, so sometimes there is that sort of preconceived um, idea or just misunderstanding about what a deacon is. But I think what works best is just to name it and claim it and talk about it. And so you know, we, Pastor John and I, who I work with now, we've done some fun like dialogue sermons for Maundy Thursday, talking about foot washing and how that's a symbol of the diaconate and what it means. What all of our call is wrapped up in that one holy day, right? So having that
Hmm.
conversation about sacrament and the service component of that holy gathering of disciples, and that like one isn't more important than the other, and both of them are really valuable and holy. So that kind of thing is just, I think, is really helpful for people just to hear it again and again and again. And anytime I get a chance to preach, just because that's one of the most public things um, you can do in congregational life where there's a deacon involved. You name it, right? Like
Hmm.
the Bible doesn't always say, and then Deacon Philip did this. But to name, oh yeah, remember this is Philip who was a deacon, um, is really helpful for people to hear that or be reminded of the history or the story that's in our sacred texts.
So expand
Yeah.
on what you just kind of mentioned, Maundy, Thursday, and I think that this is
Hmm.
crucial to the role of deacon. Could you kind of expand on why that day is so important for the diaconate?
Yeah, I mean, the symbolism of the diaconate is the basin and towel,
Hmm.
right? So you think of Maundy Thursday, Jesus humbly getting on his knees and washing the nasty feet of his disciples, um, and wiping them off with the towel he wrapped around his own body, right?
Hmm.
So this is this is not glorious, prideful work.
Hmm.
And one of the things that the symbol of the deacon in worship is the deacon stole, which goes crossways. Not every tradition has this. This is a newer symbol in the ELCA, but it's a much more well known symbol across denominations. That the way that hangs is supposed to mimic the way a towel would hang off of
Mm.
a person who was washing feet, right? Um, Whereas the stole of a pastor is to mimic the yoke that um, a, a beast of burden would wear. Um, so yeah, that night is really beautiful. And I would say for me, I connect very much with those texts, both Maundy Thursday and the text of the woman washing Jesus' feet as
Mm.
being just incredibly beautiful um, acts of service and love that are so humble and so shocking that we must stop and take note.
Hmm. Yeah, I think one of the things I find interesting about you were talking earlier about Philip
Hmm.
as a deacon. Of course, the other well-known deacon in Acts is Stephen, and
Hmm.
his witness, which basically got him killed, um,
Hmm.
which seems to be mindful of it, at least from what I've noticed and observed from deacons, um, both in Lutheran and in other traditions, is in some ways they do very much resemble what Christ did on Maundy, Thursday, or the washing of the feet with the woman's hair, in that it kind of
Hmm.
shocks people, both within
Yeah,
and without the church. And I think that that's an interesting, it's an important witness in a way that I think a pastor can't do.
yeah, yeah. And I mean, to be fair, there are a lot of pastors who do diaconal work,
Hmm.
really. I mean, you think about the work of advocacy, working
Hmm.
for justice. I mean, um, there are, I think it comes to mind the Poor People's Campaign is headed up by two pastors, I'm pretty sure. But that work is so diaconal to me. I
Hmm.
look at it and say, oh, this is such diaconal work. It doesn't mean a pastor can't do it, right?
No.
But for me, that's it's and part of I would say part of my call is like that's where my heart is, right? Like, um, I joked with people in seminary when we'd have new students coming in that I helped sort of welcome, like, oh, I don't think sacraments are important, which it's that is not true. But for me, my heart is not at the basin and at the table.
Hmm.
I think those things are important. My heart is out in the world
Hmm.
with people who are hurting, and there's probably a lot of pastors who would agree with that statement, honestly. But for me, I felt like no, this is where I'm called to be. Is this weird diaconal stuff? I was just rambling, so I don't remember your
Nope.
question anymore.
Actually, it wasn't a question. It was more of just an observation of what I see kind of in the role of deacon. And then that, like I said, I think it is out in the world. It is in some ways also very, as you said, advocacy is one way of doing it. But I think whatever it does, it's always kind of pushing the church into the world. Um, and
Yeah.
it's not that pastors don't
Yeah.
do that, but I think the role has, as it has grown, it has established itself over centuries, is really to pull the church and to remind the church where its mission field is.
Right. Our mission field is not to keep the members who are already coming to the church happy.
Yes,
That's
exactly.
that's not it. The Yeah, I like the way you said that. The diaconal ministry, when I was going through my formation, had a cross that had the infinity symbol as the crossbars. And so I have my old vestments are towels with that symbol on them, and that symbol represents that deacons take the needs of the world and bring them to the church, and bring the needs of the church out into the world, so that it's this
Ah,
constant going in and out of the church, crossing boundaries, crossing bridges, building bridges, that sort of thing. I mean, I think that image is really helpful in terms of, it's not a stagnant thing. And that, as the church, we don't have all the answers. Um, and we're not a place that, we have problems that we need the world's help on too. So, that symbolism can be really helpful if you know what it's about.
mm-hmm.
Hmm.
Mm. So
I'm
go
curious.
ahead.
Well, does your denomination have a diaconate, an official diaconate, or a lay diaconate?
We have a congregational diaconate, and that,
Mm,
so there are in most disciple congregations deacons and elders. Um,
okay.
and of course, elders, that's in very much a holdover from our Presbyterian roots. But
Okay.
the deacons, um, it depends, I think, on the congregation, but they served certain terms. But I think the thing that I've always been more fascinated by the actual kind of, for lack of a better term, office of a deacon, is that we
Hmm.
don't do a good job in helping people understand what the biblical role of a deacon was. So
Hmm.
in a lot of churches, they end up being um, ushers, um,
Mm,
that will take
okay.
the offering
Interesting.
and do things of that. And that's nothing wrong with that. Um, but it kind of veers away of think of what was the original meaning of a deacon. Um,
Yeah.
and, you know, knowing that I know what the word deacon means, it's kind of like, yeah, that's not really what we're doing right now. And I would
Right.
love to see more of kind of an established, um, either a lay or, whether it's lay or not, that was more established in that way,
Yeah.
of
Yeah.
service.
Because I think about being an usher as like one of the most core ways to serve the church itself.
Hmm. Yeah, exactly.
Right. It's just like good order and worship. Um, and there's nothing wrong with that, but I don't see that connecting to that living on the margins, and connecting with those who are kind of on the edge, and one foot in, one foot out.
Yeah. So, I've always kind of
Hmm.
appreciated the traditions that do actually have a specific, um, office of deacon, because
Hmm.
I think the church, and we still need that office. We still need to have that role that reminds us of, you know, where our mission is. Um,
Yeah.
and I think
Yeah, and
that's,
I think it's, well, I know you've talked and thought and reflected a lot about like where's the church going.
hmm.
And the more that we serve ourselves, the more down we're going, right?
Yes.
And
Yep.
so I have great hope for the future of the church, um, when we have deacons rising up, because I wouldn't say that I don't care about the institution of the church. That's not exactly true, but I really care about the neighbor.
Hmm.
And I think that's where, um, I mean, telling the good news to someone who really needs good news,
Hmm.
um, matters, and being good news to someone who needs it matters.
Hmm.
That's what I think transforms. That's where transformation happens.
Yeah. And I think the role of pastor is, I think, as important as it is. The temptation is sometimes that we can get very insular because we're kind of called to an institution, and there's I don't say that as being against institutions, but um, it's just that pull is very internal,
Yeah,
and there needs to be kind of a counter force that is external that can push out, and remind the people, because I think, especially in my tradition, but I see it in others, it can be so easy for the pastor to just kind of just work with who's there inside and not really venture out.
I think every I think that's in every I think that's in every denomination, right? In fact, I served a congregation that, as I was getting to know them and learn their history and that sort of thing, um, they basically had a big split, and they chased one of their pastors out because they had spent too much time in the community, right? Like they weren't serving us, the church, the
Oh dear.
congregation, and that would caused a huge conflict. Um, which the people who were telling this story didn't see it that way. But for me, it was like, oh my goodness, that's kind of horrifying. Because how awesome is that? That your pastor spending all this time out in the neighborhood and, with community leaders and organizations and all that kind of stuff. And that was a problem. And, I think for most churches, the pastors have to kind of ride the edge of that,
We do, yeah.
be involved in the community, but not too involved
Hmm.
because we're paying your salary. I mean, I don't mean to be cynical about it, but I think there is that sort of reality.
No, I think it is the reality. It's very much the reality. It's something that I feel, and I know probably a lot of other pastors feel, and sometimes they can't deal with that. And I think that's why some people end up leaving the ministry. It's just they want to be able to reach outside of the congregation and hopefully have the congregation come with them, but too often they don't want
Hmm.
to.
Right. Yeah, and I mean, imagine a world where every congregation had a deacon. I mean,
I think it would change a lot. The church would change.
what would that Holy Spirit do with us?
Hmm.
um, yeah.
So that kind of brings up one thing, because I'm, and for those who don't know, we are co-workers. We work at the same congregation. At least I
Hmm.
do during the week. Um, but I'm starting to see more um, Lutheran congregations with deacons on staff. That is
Hmm.
seems to be becoming more common. Um, is that just something I know? I mean, is that actually a trend, or is it just I'm just kind of seeing it? But that seems to be growing. That people are more accepting or willing to kind of take on a deacon.
Yeah, I don't know if, like, I don't have like statistics about people who are on the word and service roster. Anecdotally, what I can say is that I think as time goes, the more deacons there are, the more deacons want to be more people want to be deacons, kind
Hmm.
of. I mean, when I was going through candidacy, I had never met a diaconal minister until I was like 3 years into seminary, 2 years into seminary.
Wow.
And so how do you imagine being something you've never seen? And the poor diaconal minister I met at a conference, the first one I met, I just sort of like lost my mind and went up to her like, "Oh my goodness, you're like this unicorn I've been dreaming of." And she did really cool ministry with like disaster preparedness
Hmm.
for congregations to be like um, beacons of supplies and all this kind of stuff when that kind of thing happened. I mean, just really cool on the edge ministry. Um, so yeah, and I think the other thing is that the unification of the rosters into one role of deacon in the ELCA has just put all this. Now we have the same language. We have, instead of referring to three different things, we just say deacon. So you hear that a lot more. There's that many more people in the roster. When I went through my formation, I mean, people actually would say, like, I was the 101st diaconal minister. Like, they knew their number because there were so few of them. And when I went through, they're like, please don't refer to your number. We want to stop that sort of trend um, of identifying yourself that way. So so there's a lot more deacons than there were deaconesses or diaconal ministers or whatever when those were all separate entities. And also um, it connects with, I think, because of that sort of um, publicity, for lack of a better word, pastors know what deacons are now,
Hmm.
at least more. I have had, I'm just trying to count here, 4 calls to be a deacon since I graduated seminary. Only 2 of those were through the official church process, where they were, um, and one of them was maybe not even that because it was like the synod office asking me to look at something, but where they were intentionally looking for a word in service person. They wanted a deacon to fill that role that the congregation was looking for. The other calls that I found have been jobs. They've been looking for a layperson. Um, and I've applied for it and said, I'm a deacon. If you want me, you have to go through the call process and work with the synod. So, which is a challenge, and every denomination, this is like a field of landmines navigating this process. But in the ELCA, for a pastor to do that is very frowned upon.
Oh yeah.
But for a deacon to sort of advocate for themselves, I think is pretty normal. You kind of if you're going to be a deacon, you have to sort of know how to walk that line, because the world is still trying to figure out what to do with us.
So there isn't necessarily at this point a formal call process for deacons. Oh, there is
There
now.
is, and
Okay.
it mirrors
Okay.
the pastor call process. Um, every every congregation must follow their constitution about how to call a rostered leader.
Hmm.
Um, but the two of my jobs I have specifically applied for with like a resume, which the
Hmm.
church does not use, uh, and said, I'm a deacon. If your committee decides you want to hire me, it won't be a hiring process. It'll be a call process. you need to refer to your constitution about what that looks like.
How did they
And if
respond?
you need help, talk to your synod office. Well, two of the congregations, Faith, where I serve now, is one of
Hmm.
them. Said, "Okay, cool. Like we'll figure this out."
Okay.
Um, and I honestly, I don't think I've interviewed for a job with that sort of um, speech
Hmm.
that I since I've become a deacon, that I didn't go on to be called into that place. So usually there's a confusion, a little bit of confusion, but people figure it out because I mean, as I'm not one who thinks reading church constitutions is fun, but it is helpful when you need a process. You need to
Hmm.
know, okay, how does this work? I mean, the Constitution just lays it out, and if that formal language is too much for you, your synod office can usually uh, help guide it. Hopefully,
Hmm. So, um, a few more questions before we wrap things up
yeah,
here. Is what has support been like for you? I know, are there groups of other deacons where you can kind of talk, and does the synod offer things to that extent? How has that helped you in your ministry?
yeah. I think it's very like local or very regional. It tends to be. There is there are Facebook groups. There are like international uh, organizations for the diaconate. For those who are involved in the deaconess community or the Lutheran Diaconal Association, there's sort of those community things you can elect to join uh, separately. But for me, honestly, the most support I've gotten in the process is, during seminary, there were a few word and service students who
Hmm.
said, "Let's just start a group." So
Mm.
we started a group called Exploring Diaconia, and I mean, it was open to anyone. We had speakers. We talked about different issues. We had people who are doing interesting ministry come and share. I mean, it really was helpful to do that. And now I would say the most um, helpful and supportive thing in the St. Paul area synod of the ELCA, we have a deacon group. Our bishop actually brags we have the most deacons um, in our synod, which is one, awesome, and two, so great that our bishop knows that and brags about it.
That is good.
But so that group, we've gotten together and done worship and service projects, had different people speak. I mean, we've done some different things like that, but just that collegiality and camaraderie is really helpful. The St. Paul Synod a couple years ago also offered a preaching cohort for deacons. And so I participated in that because I just thought, well, Barbara Lundblad was leading it. I
Oh
was like,
yeah,
if I could do it to Barbara Lundblad, I'm totally going to do that. And that was awesome because one of the things that I think we all shared in common is that, like, I don't preach every other week or every week. So when I do preach, I feel like I got to hit it out of the park. And so, um, how do you know, how do you sort of show up? How do you show up as a deacon when you're not always the front and center person preaching? Um, and so again, that kind of learning together was really, really wonderful. But I think it really is so localized, and not every synod has enough deacons to make a group like that work, but there are a lot of places. I mean, if there's people who are in the diaconate that are listening, or there are a lot of places to find that kind of thing. There's the Lutheran Diaconal Association, the Deaconess community. There's DOTAC. I can never remember what that stands for, but there's I think it's Diaconia of the Americas and Caribbean or something like that is what DOTAC is. And there's similar organizations around the world actually. So
And I'll try to make sure I put some of these organizations in
yeah,
the show notes.
I can get you some of the like links and stuff.
So, where do you see the future of the diaconate? Do you see it expanding? Have you seen it expanding?
That is a hard question. I think the the thriving of the diaconate is imperative for the thriving of the church. And at the same time, I also see denominational bodies who are fearful of good decline, and they're fearful of or reactionary maybe to the need for pastors, particularly in rural areas, who focus a lot on developing pastors for leadership out of that fear. And I don't think that's a hard thing. I don't know that that's right or wrong, but I do grieve the focus on developing pastors only because of that fear of decline, of closing church doors, kind of.
Because you think that deacons could also be one of the signs of renewal, or that could help,
Right.
churches turn around.
Right. Yeah. And part of the issue in the ELCA, and again, that's where I serve, and that's what I'm most familiar with. So it's hard for me to speak of other denominations, but is that in the ELCA, deacons are not permitted to preside over sacraments. So, in rural areas where there's not enough pastors, if a deacon is called into that place, they either have to get special permission from a bishop to preside over sacraments, or that community is limited in its ability to celebrate sacraments. So that's a hard thing, right? And I think it depends on the locality. It depends on the bishop and what sort of their take on things is. And also, I mean, it's funny that, 3-4 years ago, not being able to have a communion every week would have horrified many a congregation. And then we went for how long without communion,
Oh, dear
or
Lord,
communion
yes.
the way we think communion should be, because of the pandemic. And it was okay. It was fine. So, yeah, I'm really curious, the seminary closest to us is Luther Seminary, and I'm really curious about their enrollment and when that looks like, in terms of students seeking the diaconate and those seeking sacramental ministry. Yeah, I really don't know. I don't know that they publish that information either. I mean, I'm sure it's somewhere, but
I do know when I was going to Luther, and this was in the late 90s, I did not know of any people who were becoming deacons of any type.
yeah.
My guess is that that has changed over the last 15, 20 years, that there's, more people being called into ministry, that's where they're going. But I also know, if I look at seminary tracts and all of that stuff, there is not of a focus, a diaconal focus.
Yeah. Yeah. And it's interesting that, I mean, when I was in seminary, there was a lot of us.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, there was enough that we had like a group, right? Um, and uh, yeah, so that did change. Seminary enrollment. Who knows what that graph looks like? It's
Mm-hmm.
probably kind of a mess, but um, yeah, there was enough. There was enough, and I was probably there 10 years after you, um, for people to know someone. We weren't silent and invisible on campus. The other thing too, I think is kind of interesting. So I remember when I did this part of my formation, I had to go to Gettysburg and do a class over January, and folks went to other seminaries. Some of them they had to do a diaconal like degree, whereas at Luther you just chose a master's program.
Mm-hmm.
Any master's program was fine. I mean, one of my friends did an MDiv.
Hmm.
That's the master's program she chose to do diaconal work. Um, where others did, a master in New Testament, master's in children's and family, whatever your focus was, that's what your academic work was. And the diaconal call just was a parallel process.
Mm-hmm.
Um, so, I mean, at least in the Lutheran tradition, even different seminaries handled it differently.
Hmm.
When I went through, I would guess that's still the same today. And I'm not sure about in other places, but I liked it that way
Mm-hmm.
because it let me do academic work based on my interest,
Hmm.
not just like, oh, here's the class for the diaconal people.
Mm.
I mean,
Yeah.
all of my classes were with a whole there was MDiv, MTH, I don't know. I mean, everyone who was doing a degree was in the same classes. It didn't matter what. And obviously, some of them attracted, the children, youth, and family classes usually were people who were doing that degree program or that concentration alongside their MDiv, but not exclusively.
So, final question I want to ask is, let's say there is someone out there listening that is maybe in their early 20s and they feel a call to ministry, and they're feeling a call maybe to the diaconate.
Hmm.
What advice would you give them? What words of encouragement?
Hmm. I would say listen to your passion, um, because you're a unicorn.
Mm-hmm.
And the world doesn't quite always know what to do with you. But you know who God has created you to be, and trust that God has a place for you. Um, and I would also say that you have to find people who get it to journey with you, because at least for me, there were a lot of voices saying, "You can preach, be a pastor. Just be a pastor; it'll be easier." Become a pastor, then you'll be able to get a job. There was, um, if you become a pastor, then people will respect you. I mean, people who cared about me said these things, right? Um, because they were real about the about the way the world works. Um, and I didn't listen to them. And I'm glad that I didn't. I'm glad that I didn't. It's definitely there's definitely been challenges, but I mean, it's not like being a pastor, you're not challenged also.
Yeah.
It might just be it might just be different challenges. So Yeah, and I would just say don't be afraid to ask questions, and because every, whatever your denomination or your church polity is, it's going to be different and probably confusing. And especially in denominations where there's not a lot of deacons, like the people you ask might not even know the answers. And you might have to keep digging. So, yeah, God has called you.
And I think that's a good way to end it. Well, thank you so much.
Mhm.
This has been
Thanks, Dennis.
a great discussion, and I think a hopeful discussion,
Yeah.
and I hope a hopeful message for people out there, um, to learn a bit more about this important role for the church.
Yeah. I think so too. And um, yeah, I'm grateful for the conversation. It's been fun.
All right. Well, take care. Thank you.
All right, bye.